But just before we kind of arrive to this future where there's no work, or at least not cognitive work that needs to be done.
Right.
So maybe in the, let's say 5 years from now, how do you see AI blending into our kind of office work, for instance?
Well, 5 years is much more realistic because we're already beginning to see glimmers of it. Many of the technologies that are going to be widely used in 5 years already exist. I mean, one of the first things I realized as an economist, and it's become more and more clear over the past, 30 years that I've been working this field, is that it's one thing to invent a technology. It's another thing for it to be widely adopted. Often it takes 5, 10, even 20 or 30 years before technology is diffused. So right now we do see technologies that are helping people write memos. We see technologies that are helping with diagnosing diseases. We see technologies that are helping with customer service and coding. And they're not yet widely diffused. There's just a few leading edge companies. So in 5 years, I expect it to be much more widely diffused, and we're going to have a distribution. In the research that I've been looking at, we find that the technology has been leading to bigger and bigger gaps between companies. The leaders are pulling away. The top 10%, the top 20% of firms are pulling away, whether you measure it by profits, sales, return on investment. They're adopting these technologies and getting a lot of benefits from it. And the median firm or the lagging firms are falling further behind. So we see a bigger gap between the top firms and the rest of the firms. And we will probably see that continuing in the next 3 to 5 years.
If I understood you correctly, in some sense you are saying that some of the technology that will be widespread in office work in 5 years, they essentially are around now. It's just a question of diffusion that will take this 5 years to get there.
That's for the bulk of people. That's exactly what we're going to see. It just takes a surprisingly long time. I mean, many of your listeners may have heard the story of how electricity took 30 to 40 years from its invention and early adoption in factories in the 1880s till about the 1920s before you saw really big productivity gains. And what happened in between was that at first people were just using electricity to replace steam engines, but basically doing all their work the same way as before. It took a generation before they reinvented the factory and started having, instead of one big central power source, a bunch of smaller motors, each electrically powered, that were distributed throughout the factory over a single story. And the flow of materials is what dictated the placement of the machines. That second approach led to a doubling or tripling of productivity, but it wasn't the electricity by itself that enabled that. It was a combination of electricity with new ways of working. We see the same thing in my research with the introduction of computers or going back earlier to the steam engine, and I think we're going to see it with AI as well.